I don't know if this is the real Green New Deal that we're going to be dealing with. This was something that NPR put up. I think it's the one that they said, no, that's not the real one. But then later someone else involved said, oh, well, that's all the stuff that's going to be in it, but that's not our finished one. So, like, it doesn't matter that it's not the real one.
They're gonna make sure there aren't any typos, but as far as they're concerned, the content is all correct.
Yeah, but you can see,
that's what you're saying.
The House resolution number isn't up there. The original signature of member isn't. So it's definitely like a draft of a finished copy. If it says,
it fills out the forms properly.
Yeah, it says it's the Green New Deal final copy, but it might not. There may be changes in the future. However, as people who have done this before, I think you and I can safely say that all of the things that are in this resolution are the things that are going to be in the final resolution.
These people aren't smart enough to know what to change.
Yeah, that doesn't help. I mean, especially obviously the person that proposed it isn't also the person that wrote everything, because these are ideas that people have flung around for a long time. It's nothing new. People are acting like Alex Jones Ocasio-Cortez. They're acting like she's got all these fresh new ideas, and this is just the same crap that has been spouted by the combination of socialist, communist, and environmentalist groups for forever, and the weird climate people that think that they understand how science works, but their idea of science is hiding information from the public so that you can't actually check on what they're saying. Like, you can't fact check them. So
yeah, no, of course not.
So how is it science?
Right. Their models are all secret.
Yeah, they're all
proprietary, I think is the word they use.
Yeah. So we're looking at the Green New Deal here, and it's 14 pages long, but it's government pages, so like the margins are almost
they're like half a real page.
Yeah. No, they're less than that. I mean, like, you remember when they had that massive 2,000-page healthcare bill?
Yeah.
I went and read through that. It was 2,000 pages, like, in page count. But given the way that they format things, where they've got the really big padded margins, and there's a lot of space between lines and paragraphs, and there's a lot of list entries to where each line is a really short list item.
Yeah.
You can usually, when something gets as big as 2,000 pages in government, you can seriously divide that by 10. It was really only 200-some pages of content in the end. This one is 14 pages, again, huge margins, a little more condensed than the healthcare bill was, but we can go through and look at some of these things and talk about them, see where they're going, see what their plan is. I use the word plan loosely. We're going to find out why in a minute.
Uses it in the Bolshevik sense.
Yes. The good old Bolshies. So let's dig right in, because we don't want to make a too big a thing out of this, too long a thing, because
let's get through this. This shouldn't take very long.
Well, okay, and you know, from my perspective, like, you're an actual scientist. You're not a weather scientist. You're a physicist, but you're an actual scientist. So you've got more experience in the workings of, you know, science than I do. I have a bit of a background in engineering.
There's no actual science in this.
Yeah, there's not going to be.
There's not going to be. There's going to be. I can tell already from the first paragraph that they're just going to take a report that was not written. A report that condenses a large amount of scientific data, strips all the science out of it, and basically makes it into stuff for politicians to use to put, you know, iron rings on people's necks.
Yeah, politicians and groups of lawyers, basically.
Yeah, basically. But will you repeat yourself?
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was a lawyer, though.
She was a bartender.
Yeah, not all of them were lawyers. Yeah, no,
most of them are, though.
She actually, she used to do something productive with her life.
Yeah, exactly.
Then she got into politics. Now it's the destructive path. It's kind of funny. I was thinking about it the other day, and I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, but it kind of struck me that, like, the whole point of the light side and the dark side of the Force was that one was easy to attain power in and one was not. And I was thinking about that in terms of politicians, and just like, yeah, that's actually a real thing. I mean, it's a lot easier to gain power and influence and even money by getting into government than it is to, be someone who builds something that, employs people and creates a product that other people actually desire.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I don't know if that was the intention of George Lucas when he was coming up with these ideas, but it really rings true. It's like it's a good metaphor for the difference between the private and public sector.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's dig into it now. Let's not go off into movie discussion here.
Yeah.
So the resolution, let's see, it says recognizing the duty of the federal government to create a Green New Deal. So right off the bat, it's a duty of the federal government to create what is called a Green New Deal, which I guess in essence means a New Deal, which is hearkening back to FDR's New Deal.
Catastrophe.
Yeah, his catastrophe. So we're already talking about the duty of the government to create catastrophe, so there's nothing new here. Right. And they throw the word green in front of it, so it's about the planet now. It's about protecting the planet, whatever that means. I really think like there's no way you can interpret the things that they say as protecting the planet if you actually listen to what they're talking about. They're talking about protecting human beings, and not even that. Sometimes they're just talking about protecting land, and that kind of makes you wonder because a lot of these wealthy people have land that's by the sea, and
I mean they don't actually believe this stuff.
Well, yeah, obviously, but
their actions speak volumes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll point some of this out as we're going through. A lot of it is a government power grab, and
well, yeah, I mean, that's how it always works. They're always trying to find reasons to get. I mean, that's the thing about democracy, right? Is that we spend a bunch of time in these government schools, and the government schools teach us that the government is good and looking out for us, and then people in the government get there because they love power, and then what they do when they're there is they try to find rationalizations to give them more power. That's what they do.
Yeah. So with that introduction, let's see.
So we got the first couple paragraphs already. They're talking about a special report on global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius by the IPCC. And they're saying a couple of things that aren't actually supported by studies, as far as I know. Like there's still a decent amount of questioning as to whether these things are true. And then they actually get a couple things wrong, it looks like here. So
just looking at the points, if you want, go ahead.
Number one, human activity is the dominant cause of observed climate change. Some people say that, some people don't. It's extremely hard to measure that kind of thing, especially since you have to take into account all of the non-human as well as human sources of climate change. And
if I could
make
point out, when you talk to people about this sort of thing, and they're on the side of humans being the dominant cause, whether or not that even matters. Like I wouldn't even be sure if it matters if what the dominant cause is. What matters is whether there's an actual problem and whether there's actually anything we can or should do about it. But when you talk to these people, they are really quick to either discount or they have absolutely no knowledge of the other factors. Like there are people that talk like they're experts, but they have no idea about the shifting of the tilt of the Earth as it rotates around the sun, and the temperature changes that causes, and the background radiation as the Earth moves through the arm of the galaxy, the various reasons why that might play into Earth's temperature, the shifting magnetic field. Most of them don't even acknowledge these things. They're just like, no, it's farting cows and your cars are putting CO2 in the atmosphere, and they fail to even recognize that there used to be a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere before. Life itself is what causes.
That's why we have coal to begin with, is because massive forests died and were fossilized.
Yeah, life itself has been the cause of many of the shifts of the gases in the atmosphere, and therefore the changes of the temperature. And yes, the Industrial Revolution probably contributed significantly to the amount in the atmosphere, but we don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. And there's a lot of things, there's a lot of reasons why it might be a good thing. I mean, higher temperatures don't mean the death of humanity until they get to a really high point. And there's a lot of good that can come from higher temperatures.
Well, yeah, I mean, the world is, what, 11% greener than it was 100 years ago? Something like that?
Yeah, and that means there's more plants that are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere too.
Yes, it's called the negative feedback loop.
Yeah.
So there's
a lot that's not taken into account sometimes when the point I wanted to make,
they cherry pick it deliberately.
Yeah, no, the point I wanted to make is that it's really suspicious that they don't acknowledge these things, and it makes you wonder, like, you can't just say these people are automatically right when they're not acknowledging all these things without maybe just saying, well, do they have some kind of agenda? If they attack people that point these things out, and usually the side that is right, or at least decent, isn't the side that's going to attack you when you discuss it.
If it were science, they wouldn't need to attack people.
Exactly. If it were science, they would not need to attack people. That's a great way to put it. So, number 2, a changing climate is causing sea levels to rise and an increase in wildfires, severe storms, droughts, and other extreme weather events that threaten human life, healthy communities, and critical infrastructure.
So again, the link between severe storms is also very tenuous.
Yeah, like, I've never actually seen something that convinced me there even was a link.
No, there was a guy a couple of in the early 2000s who had to quit the IPCC because they wanted to put the severe storm thing in, and he's like, there's no evidence for that.
And they put it in anyway, and
they put it in anyway, and it just gets more and more alarmist every time they write it.
Yeah, so I mean, there's significant reasons, again, why you would want to question people that are so quick to throw anyone out that disagrees with them. I think more than anything, that's the more disturbing thing that people should be paying attention to is the demonization of anyone who questions what's being put forward. There's
no. Because they're talking about events that threaten human life, but the net effect of this plan is to seriously dampen human life.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to get there. We're only
how healthy is your community in Michigan going to be when you can't get gas to heat your house?
Oh, it's not healthy at all. I mean, the whole point that we're going to end up making throughout this is that everything that's being proposed here basically means, if you were to implement all of these things, you're going to be living in a hut keeping warm by a fire because it's just not possible to do the things that...
No, you won't be keeping warm by a fire because fire won't be allowed. Fire creates carbon.
Yeah, it's actually... That's how bad it is. It's not the language that it's going to spell out, but if you pay attention to what they're actually proposing, and I haven't even read the whole thing yet, and this is where it's going to end up. We know this because we've seen this before. This isn't the first time things like this have been proposed. So let's go on. So number 3, global warming at or above 2 degrees Celsius beyond pre-industrialized levels will cause A, mass migration from regions most affected by climate change. All right, well, okay. 2 things
over the course of, hold on. Mass migration over the course of 100 years. How often do you move?
Not very often.
How many times have you moved in the last 5 years?
2.
There you go.
All right, so nothing big there. Mass migration over 100 years isn't really migration. That's just like...
Well, it's migration. It's just on such a slow timescale that it's totally reasonable for humans to actually do it.
Yeah, and not only that, but I mean,
they say from the regions most affected by climate change, but there will actually be migration to other regions that are affected by climate change, namely the places that are made more greener and the soil more arable by climate change. Let's assuming that it happens the way that they think it's going to happen.
No, everything's in that negative.
There's going to be places in Canada that become greener and become farmland, and that's how that's going to work.
There's people that will stay there because of that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the cold of Michigan, but if Michigan was going to get warmer in the next 10 years, I wouldn't really see a need to leave.
They're not talking about warmer. They're talking 2 degrees Celsius.
I know. That's the part that really is annoying, is just the offhanded way that, like, oh, this is going to like I've seen people. I think Ocasio-Cortez is one of the people that actually said this will kill us in 12 years. Like, this will wipe out humanity, which is just insane.
Yeah, it's alarmist nonsense. Then they say more than $500 trillion in lost annual economic output by the year 2100. Of course, first off, I think that estimate is wrong. I think that even the most pessimistic estimates say that it's only a couple percent of GDP per year. And second off, that's a couple percent off of the normal growth that you would have. I mean, so we're talking about actually not that large of an amount. We're talking a few percent per year. And therefore, and so, Bob Murphy talks about this a lot, that if you actually look at the numbers that they give, it's not actually that insurmountable a cost. Second off, the cost that they give here, this 500 trillion number, is far less than it would cost to geoengineer away the effects of global warming, assuming it happens the way they expect it to. You can do all kinds of things inexpensively to change the albedo of the upper atmosphere and reduce the amount of solar power that gets in. It's actually not that hard, and it's actually pretty inexpensive to do on the scale of hundreds of millions as opposed to trillions. So that's a factor of 10,000 that they're off. Wildfires that will burn at least twice as much forest area in the western United States than was typically burned by wildfires in the years preceding 2019. The wildfires are entirely caused by government regulation of those forests that prevent people from putting up reasonable fire breaks.
Yeah, not only that, but
and they're also natural. Wildfires are natural.
Yes, they are. They happen, and there's many reasons that there's many ways to stop them, and a lot of things that happened in the United States logging industry directly contributed to them not being stopped.
Well, it's not just logging industry.
Yeah,
it's
not just them, but
it's just the federal government and several state governments basically claim ownership of this land, and they prevent any actual maintenance of the land from happening. So you get overgrowth, and of course overgrowth results in wildfires. No one is surprised by this.
Well, Ocasio-Cortez is.
Well, yeah, but Ocasio-Cortez has an IQ of 75.
It's smarter than I gave her credit for, but okay.
You can surprise her with a sock monkey. I mean, come on.
Hello, Alexandria. Today we're going to teach you
Holy
why
shit!
Sanders doesn't understand economics. All right, so
let's see, we
a
got
loss of more than
99%
of all coral reefs on Earth. And I mean, this is okay. So this is like those people that think if all the bees died that the Earth would turn into a desert. That's not actually what would happen. There's a lot of insects that do a lot of things that would not only cover what the bees do, but there's also insects that haven't been discovered yet, because we discover new species all the time. We don't know what they're doing. Furthermore, it's been shown very recently that a lot of plant life has this interconnected network in the soil where they actually they refer to it as a giant computer system for trees. It's kind of a weird thing. It's a complicated organic system, but it's not quite how people describe it. It's just a system of signals and pressure that, like certain plants, if they're injured, will receive more water from the soil because of this system that the cells in the plants kind of detect that there's a problem, and they deliver more moisture to certain areas. It's weird, but it's like this complicated system that people theorized existed, and I guess they recently discovered it was real. And it's interesting. We should talk about it one day, because it actually does a lot of the functions that money does for human beings, and the correlation is pretty neat to make, and we should talk about that one day. But that's a long subject to get into.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that a lot of plants probably would die if the bees disappeared, but plant life would not cease to exist. That's an insane estimate of what's going on.
The question to ask is, why would all the bees die? Right? Yes, if all the bees died, a serious pollinator would be lost, right? But but why would all the bees die? Like this is just alarmism. It's like, oh, some beehives are having problems. All the bees might die. This is.
Yeah, no, there's no reason to think that's actually going to happen. I just
and there's no reason to think that. I mean, coral reefs are incredible. You know, they're like coral animals. Yeah, they do have a fairly narrow range of places where they will be, where they'll be healthy. But the movement of coral reefs from one place to another has been a thing since, you know, coral animals existed. So
yeah, and
like this is just like looking at, oh wow, this coral reef died and another one sprung up over here. It's just this kind of like anthropomorphizing of nature, basically. It's like, oh well, no coral reef would ever die if it weren't for the greatest monster, man.
Yeah,
it's
dumber than that too, because you know it's hard to convince people of this that don't understand.
I mean, like sedimentary rock is made out of dead coral. Like that's partly, of course, but like these things build up and they grow and they die and they get eroded by the ocean, and then they grow and they die, and this is natural, and this is not insane.
Now, I'm going back to school book stuff, but don't people farm coral reefs for some kind of profit? I don't remember. I see.
I'm sure that they do somewhere, but I mean, she's mostly talking about like the reefs that are, you know, owned and administered by governments, you know, like the Great Barrier Reef and so on and so forth, where the ownership is diffused and therefore there's no responsibility to keep them healthy.
And I'm going to go ahead and make a bit of a guess here, for anyone that wants to look into it further. I do not know this, but I'm going to guess that, given that coral creatures are very reliant on, you know, in a lot of cases, living where there's heat to sustain them. I mean, where do you find them? Near volcanic fissures and on coasts and so forth. I'm going to just guess that some of the things that human beings do near the water actually promote the growth of coral reef. I wouldn't know that for sure, but generating a heat source alone would be something that would be helpful to coral reef.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone that wants to look into that and prove me right or wrong, more power to you. Anyway, where do we leave off? More than 350 million more people to be exposed globally to deadly heat stress by 2050, as opposed to, say, 6 billion people dying of starvation because we're not allowed to run refrigerators anymore.
Or the 350 million people that will be exposed globally to deadly cold stress by the lack of ability to heat your house.
Yeah. There's a couple
like seriously, like if you were not, let's pretend that you're not allowed to heat your house at all, right? What parts of the United States are actually habitable? I mean, I'm in New Mexico. It wouldn't be habitable here if I couldn't heat my house.
You mean cool your house?
No, I mean heat my house.
Does it get that cold there? I know it snowed there that one time you were telling me.
It doesn't necessarily get that cold here, but if you literally cannot heat, if you're not permitted to heat your house, right?
Oh.
If it ever gets below, 30 degrees or something like that, your pipes freeze, this happens, that happens, and frankly, you can't really do a whole lot of work when you're shivering constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's New Mexico, so that's actually, that's a good, I hadn't actually considered that. My head I was thinking...
Like seriously, next winter, you're in Michigan, next winter, turn off your heat entirely and see how long you survive. It won't be long.
I'm a bad example of that because I actually do that and wear coats in my apartment, but...
Well, you can, but your pipes might freeze or things like that. Like, other things can happen other than...
I should stipulate. I don't turn my heat off. I turn it down really low because...
Right, I do that too. I mean, I set my heat to like 55. so that it barely turns on at all. But the point is that there's a big difference between, oh, I only heat my house a little bit, so it's 55 in here, and I don't heat my house at all.
Yeah, my pipes would freeze.
And my place is 15 Fahrenheit below zero because we've had a cold spell. Like seriously, a person who is not in really good health would die from that, and they do. It happens.
Well, there's another thing to look at here too. I mean, it says, and here I keep wanting to say she says because I'm imagining Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying it, but she didn't write all this. There were a lot of hands that went into this because it's things that a lot of people have wanted to do for a long time. So she's talking about people being exposed globally to deadly heat stress by 2050. But in a previous paragraph, it was already pointed out that over the course of time between now and 2100, people will have been migrating. So this actually becomes a non-problem. It's a complete contradiction. So, moving on, a risk of damage to $1 trillion of...
No. Quadrillion dollars.
Oh, geez. I missed a whole comma. Yeah, 1 quadrillion of public infrastructure and coastal...
So the problem with these kinds of estimates is that it assumes that that people will, in the face of rising sea levels, will simply rebuild the same buildings in the same places over and over again.
No, wait, that's 1 trillion.
No. Is it one? No, it can't be. Oh yeah, no. So right. So then I was even wrong about B. B is 500 billion. I thought it was 500 trillion, but B is 500 billion, which is a tiny number. Which is if it were 500, if the one in B were 500 trillion, that would be a fairly large deal. But this is 500 billion. This is
quite doable actually by
American
standards.
One eighth of 1 year of just the government in the United States. So the number, so B is no longer scary.
And I would be more than happy to have them bite the bullet on that one.
And if F is just 1 trillion, then that's not actually scary either, because that's saying over the course of 100 years.
Yeah, that's a drop in the bucket.
That's nothing.
As you once put it, chicken scratch.
Yes.
All right, so looking at global temperatures, they must be kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius. No explanation is ever offered. Above pre-industrialized levels to avoid the most severe impacts of a changing climate, which will require A. Global reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from human sources of 40 to 60% from 2010 levels by 2030. All right, so I'm going to make a few...
And net zero emissions by 2050.
Yeah, good luck with that one, buddy.
Well, no, I mean... It's going to be really funny when none of these fixes actually get implemented, and we don't actually see the global temperature increases, and we don't actually see the damage that they keep railing about.
No, that in itself won't be funny. What will be funny is the very next year, 2051, when someone says we're all going to die in 10 years if we don't do X, X, and X.
Yeah,
that's what's going to be funny.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think they use the like the middle ground estimates for climate change from the IPCC reports for this? Or do you think they use the worst case scenario?
I'm going to bet they use the worst case scenario.
All right.
I don't know though. I read the IPCC report once, and I haven't gone back to it in it's been 7 years maybe.
Yeah.
Or 6. I don't know. When was it written? It was.
They write a new one every year or two.
Oh, I read an old one then, so I should read the new one, because I'm sure the one I read was probably not the most recent one, because it was at least 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But they're talking about reductions in greenhouse gas emissions of 40 to 60%. Like there's nothing here saying how they could accomplish that, what good it does, why it has to be done.
No, all they're doing is looking at a curve on one of these IPCC reports and drawing a line through the curve and saying we need to be here. I mean, there's nothing.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's supposed to be the job of government. The common man doesn't have that information. Even if they have that information at their disposal, they might not understand it. And so you've got all these people working all these hours, all these days to make these proposals, but not a single one of them is coming out and saying, here's why, here's the explanation, here's what's going on, here's what our scientists are telling us, this is why it's a bad thing. And of course, part of that in a lot of these cases is because they're just using information to promote what they want, get the power they want. Another part of it is because if there's anyone that I don't trust to be able to interpret scientific fact, it's people in government.
Yep.
So, the net zero emissions thing, too, that's like, all right, well, what you're proposing is that by 2050, we are no longer allowing any third world countries to industrialize. That is exactly what's being proposed here. They get to stay in huts, and the rest of us get to start building huts for ourselves because we're not allowed to.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that the medicine's worse than the disease here, right? Like they're saying, oh, we have to go to net zero carbon to avoid spending $500 billion over the course of 100 years. Wait, what? This is the problem, right? They completely ignore the positive effects of using carbon-based energy sources. Namely, that we're able to have a pretty amazingly high standard of life, and it's all one-sided. They only look at one side of the argument, and amazingly enough, it comes up negative. If you only look at the negative sides of something, your net result is probably going to be negative.
Yeah, usually. And, the thing that really needs to be pounded into people's heads about this, anyone that doesn't understand this, there's one very important thing. You lose a lot of your standard of living. And by a lot of your standard of living, I mean, like, you aren't listening to this on YouTube anymore because there is no internet. You don't get the internet without...
Well, I mean, this is not the thing about it. I mean, look at the actions of the people that promote this kind of stuff. They have private jets. They fly around to conferences and spend a bunch of time in very expensive, very cushy hotels. And, if they actually thought that this was going to be an issue, they would probably...
well, if they actually cared, even if it was, I mean...
Well, I mean, and then there's a bunch of them that are just trying to use it to make up systems that they can use to skim a huge amount of money off the top of the economy, like Al Gore and his carbon credit market that he created, right? It's like, I'll make it so that people use less carbon, and I will get a shit ton of money in doing it. I mean, it's it's just a scam.
And it's a lot of lawyers working around the clock to give you this scam, making tons of money while they're creating the scam.
Yeah. It's an amazing racket, honestly.
It's a really good racket. I mean, I can't fault them for it being a good racket. It continues to work over and over again. People just buy into it. And the same people that will attack rich people and people that run their own businesses and are successful are the ones that are running this racket and outright cheating you out of money. Whereas, what did Apple do but sell you an iPhone, And, let's put aside all the being in bed with government stuff with these companies, which, people say that a lot, like it's the corporation's fault and the government isn't really to blame. But they are 50% of that equation. It's a big part of it. And it's always one-sided. And it's the people in government that have the power to really oppress you over it. It's not like if Apple couldn't swing deals with the government, they would still be able to do anything to you. What's the worst Apple can do to you if there's no government? They can collect your information, your private information from their phone networks for as long as you're willing to continue to use their phones. At which point, you're also partly to blame. So... the government can just put a gun to your head and say, give us all your information or we'll shoot you, and no one can stop them. We have laws that are supposed to stop them, but there's 100 different ways they can phrase it so that it happens anyway, and there's nothing you can do about it because they can invade your home and shoot your dog if they want to. But let's not get too derailed here. The point is that they're talking about reducing humanity to a standard of living 300 years ago when we've got it really good, and we do a lot of good things that I mean, we are cleaner burning energy now than we've ever been, and we're only getting cleaner and cleaner. The fact is that every time
they're not interested in cleanliness. If they were interested in cleanliness, they'd be all about nuclear power.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually going to build to that, but since you already said it, I'll find another point. We're so okay. Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos, I believe he was the one that said recently that your exhaust in your car, if you have a car that was built anytime past like 2007, I believe, the exhaust coming out of your car is safer to breathe than in a lot of major metropolitan areas. That's how clean.
Well, the levels of toxic stuff in it are so. The stuff that comes. I mean, the stuff that comes out of your car has a lot of carbon dioxide, but it's incredibly clean. Carbon dioxide and nitrogen, of course, and water vapor, and that hasn't always been the case, right? Like before the mid '80s, maybe it was a little earlier than that. It wasn't necessary to have a catalytic converter on your car, and in that case, you had lots of stuff that actually is like specifically toxic, right? Like carbon monoxide, nitrates, sulfur dioxide, things like that. And all of those are 99.9% eliminated from car exhaust today compared to how it was back then. And that technology has just gotten better, right? In the early 80s, it was pretty primitive, but nowadays you can measure the amounts of toxic gases that are in your car's exhaust in the parts per million kind of numbers. It's or even less. It's very small.
Yeah, he actually made the case in that article. I believe it was that same article that this was one of the big reasons why they had to start attacking CO2 as this dangerous gas that we all need to be protected from, because they weren't able to show that the other toxins were still there when it came to cars. And so they jumped to carbon dioxide, which is perfectly safe. I mean, you don't want to sit there.
Well, it's not safe.
Well, it's safe.
Right,
it's not toxic.
Like,
it's not doing anything harmful to the environment.
Well, on the levels that you're talking about, it's not. I mean, look, if you breathe in enough carbon dioxide, you will get sick.
Yeah, no, I mean, you'll die, but
you'll die from asphyxiation, but you don't get like. It's not like carbon monoxide where it attaches to your blood cells and causes you to be unable to breathe later.
Yeah, and
it's just asphyxiation.
He was talking about things that you're pouring into the atmosphere. Like, what's the real harm of the same substance that we exhale? And but he made a good joke about it. He was like he was talking about the movies where someone runs a hose from their exhaust to their window and sits in their garage with the car running. He made a joke like. You could try that with a modern car, but you're most likely to be found by a loved one who hasn't who hasn't heard from you in a few days, or to die of starvation before you die of suffocating. Okay. Yeah, but we can move on from the whole carbon dioxide thing because there's a lot more to go through here. Okay, so. Let's see. United States historically responsible, blah, blah, for disproportionate amounts, 20% of global greenhouse gases through 2014, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Okay, so the United States is currently experiencing several related crises, with 1, life expectancy declining while basic needs such as clean air, clean water, healthy food, and adequate healthcare, housing, transportation, and education are inaccessible to significant portions of the United States population. Okay, none of those things... So this is just false.
Yeah, this is all just false.
Not only that, but none of those things have to do with reducing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Well, no, they actually have to do with increasing it, because the way that you get healthy food, adequate healthcare, housing, etc., is by using energy. Right?
Oh yeah, energy? You cut out for a second there.
Yeah, using energy.
Using energy. Okay. Yeah, so the life expectancy thing, I think there's some truth to that, but like it's not.
No, life expectancy is not declining.
Is it not?
It's not. It's not.
Okay. I had heard something about it, but whatever. whatever I heard, I don't remember it being a significant amount. It was something like, it's like people are living 1 year less, but it was probably a demographic or something.
It's statistically insignificant.
Yeah. So clean air. We don't have trouble with clean air in this country.
No. We used to have trouble with clean air. Then we de-leaded our gasoline and we put catalytic converters on our cars. But I mean, like, clean air. Look at the air in Shanghai, for God's sake. Like this is just crazy, right? Like, it used to be that San Francisco was extremely smoggy. It's not anymore. We've got cities in China where you can't breathe the air. A couple of decades ago, living in Mexico City was the same as smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Well, there's never going to be an acknowledgement that we've solved a problem if the problem that has been solved was one they were using to get power before.
I mean, clean water. How do you get clean water? You have to recycle and clean the water that people use. Otherwise, you don't have enough of it.
And that's a process which requires energy.
That's an energy-intensive process. It's an energy-intensive process. Adequate health care. Gee, it's going to be really easy to run your MRI machine without electricity. Housing. What do we make housing out of these days? Well, we make it out of these manufactured materials that have a lower economic footprint while being more durable and more sturdy and longer lasting than just straight up wood.
Did you mean economic footprint or energy footprint?
Both.
Good answer.
Transportation? Well, how are you going to transport things without energy? I challenge Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to go 1 week without eating something that was transported on a truck.
I bet she eats organic food.
It's still transported on a truck.
Well, that's my point. It's actually probably more energy intensive to grow organic food.
Well, it's
certainly more expensive.
Education inaccessible. Is she? I mean, this is. What were they smoking when they wrote this?
The way to make education more accessible.
They're disconnected from reality.
No, the way to make education more accessible is to shut off everyone's heat. That's clearly the way that we need to do it. And
it's not like the proliferation of computers and other devices has increased the ability to educate people. God forbid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, you can't sit at home and learn anything now. It's too hard.
Liberty. Yeah.
No, but
libertyclassroom.com.
We should everybody go out and buy libertyclassroom.com for a loved one.
Yes.
Buy 3. It's worth it. If you want it, but let's take education. Let's take it at face value. If they do what they're proposing they do, it might actually make education more accessible, because if you take the students and you put them in the classroom and then you shut off the heat and they all turn into popsicles, they don't even have to leave the classroom. They can just stay there as long as they like and possibly die. But, you got to break a few eggs,
Something omelet, something Lenin.
But you can't. No, you can't. You can break the eggs, but
or was that Stalin?
No, you can break the eggs, but you can't cook the omelet because you would be using.
Well, no, that would be carbon positive.
So, 2, a 4-decade trend of economic stagnation.
This is dumb. Again, this is just not true. Deindustrialization. We moved from an. Oh my God. So, okay. First off, 4-decade trend of economic stagnation. Would you prefer to live? Would you prefer to live on $30,000 a year now, or $30,000 a year minus the inflation 4 decades ago? Gee, I have a cellular telephone and a computer and a bunch of video game systems and an air conditioner, and like 4 decades means 79?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about? I mean, or am I off by 10?
No, you're off. You're right. You're right.
Oh, okay, yeah. So 1979. That's before the invention. That's before catalytic converters became good. This is just false. Like I live so much better now than I would have 4 decades ago.
I'm actually running on fumes right now, and I am still living like a king. Like,
Yeah.
I have a lot of
Then-
fluctuations where every once in a while I end up back at the stage where I'm living paycheck to paycheck for a while, and I'm at
Yeah.
one of those right now. But everything's still good. I mean, you have no idea.
We're talking to each other over a computer on the internet, looking at a thing on a website that some jackass in or some series of jackasses in Washington D.C. produced to try to put a boot on our necks. I mean, we couldn't do that 4 decades ago.
Okay, let me put it another way. Let me put it a way that might put things into perspective, because everyone that I talk to kind of looks at it from the perspective of living in an incredibly wealthy country like America. If
Yeah.
I sold everything I own right now, I could probably move to a city in Mexico and retire.
Yeah.
Probably. I'm not sure, but it wouldn't take much more than what I have right now to be able to do that.
Yeah.
There's this. I mean, what $30,000 a year in America doesn't seem like much, but you are richer than almost everyone else in the world.
Well, it's not just that. What you can buy with that $30,000 is much better than what you could buy 40 years ago. Would you rather buy a Ford Escort or a Pinto? An AMC Gremlin, right? Like seriously. But then the next thing is even worse. 4-decade trend of deindustrialization. Yeah, it's the information age, moron. That's the whole point. What does she want to do? Make factories again? But if we made factories, then we'd start having an even more positive carbon footprint than we already do.
So her problem is being solved in front of her, and this is still what she's saying.
Well, no. It's not that the problem's being solved in front of her. It's that she's taking the solution of the problem that has happened and turning it into a bad thing.
Yes, and the deindustrialization one is actually, I mean, it's almost hilarious if it wasn't so horrifying, the implications.
How many square feet is the factory that you work in?
Oh, I wouldn't even be able to tell you. I've never looked that information up.
Like a million?
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that helps anything. I mean, the whole point of this again gets back to what the purpose of money is. We should have a discussion on this at one point. But what happens is you find the best use for time and energy by continually using what you've already built to build something better, so you don't have to go back to what you've already built. Like, we don't need that many factories anymore. We're still getting all our stuff. We're getting more stuff, and with less factories. And it's not like we're just not going to have factories to get the things we need or even want out of nowhere. What's going to happen is, through the information trade that prices and money creates, we figure out, this is what people are actually going to need us to produce. And we produce that. So the fact that we have less factories means that it's easier to produce and cheaper and you're using less resources to create the things that we want, which means that we're leaving a smaller footprint behind. That's deindustrialization is not a bad thing. The people that think it's bad are the people that lose their jobs to deindustrialization.
Deindustrialization would be a bad thing if you simply lost productivity.
Yes.
But that's not what's happened.
Yeah.
We've found other ways to be productive in addition to industrialization. And we've left the industrialization to other places in general.
Well, not just that, but we've also made it like when you take a product that you have to build from the ground up, and you build a factory to build that product, and then someone comes along and says, "I know how to build the product now. I can build like 1/4 of the product, and then another fourth, like 4 different parts of the product, with machines that are specifically designed to just build 1/4 each of the product." And so you can build a smaller factory to create a better version of something using a better design that can be much more quickly produced in compartmentalized ways, so that you don't need the giant factory that is putting each individual part together anymore. that
Right.
factory can either be scrapped for things that other people can put to better use, or could be changed to a factory to produce something else new from the ground up that we haven't built yet. It's these kinds of things are happening decade to decade all the time around us. People aren't just building new factories all the time because they want to build new factories. If they can buy a factory to produce the things they want, they'll do that too. I mean, our factory has been retooled 3 times this year to improve the way they make the parts. It's a good thing, not a horrible deindustrialization thing. That's all. I mean, that's all the point I've really got to make on that. You said it better than me, but it's a real thing. Anti-labor policy. Oh, okay, so
She means anti-union policies,
Yes.
which isn't even a thing.
yeah,
She's talking about right to work or some nonsense, which is just nonsense.
yeah. Well, I told you that our friend was actually surprised when he listened to our last Ocasio-Cortez video. He didn't even realize that she was talking about having a right to work thing going on, and it's funny because that's what people were talking about like last week. But we did that video when she was running for office and pointed that out.
Yeah, it was in her platform.
Yeah, so I mean, that's another thing. People, when you support someone, you should probably at least read their platform to find out what's in there, because a lot of people don't seem to know
Or
that.
just listen to what they actually say and think about it for 5 seconds. I mean, it's not like any of the things that were in her platform were secrets that she didn't discuss when she was asked about it. It's just that she was, a media darling, so they lobbed the softest of softballs at her in every case, and never fact checked or pushed against her at all, because she's the new Ubermensch.
Yeah, well, when we started talking about this, what was one of the first things I said is we know what's going to be in this before we even start. This isn't going to be anything that she hasn't said before.
Right. It's all old. I mean, I've said it before. These ideas are not new. They're all extremely old. They're thousands of years old. They are Garden of Eden nonsense, basically.
Yeah. So moving on. Let's see.
Hourly wages stagnating since the 70s, despite increased productivity. Okay, this is one of those things. You can listen to people talk about this, and it's a simple question. Would you rather live on $30,000 a year today, or on the same amount inflation adjusted in the late 70s? So like $18,000 in the 70s. Well, what can you get today that you couldn't get in the 70s? Everything. In the 1970s, it was about a 50-50 chance that your car would have an air conditioner. There were no smartphones, there were no iPhones, there were no cellular phones at all. I mean, heck, I think that was like the heyday of the VCR, right? Like that was when the VCR was a brand new thing.
Yeah.
There were all of your media is on, magnetic tape. Your TVs are, 11 inches black and white half the time. I mean, seriously, even if your wages stagnate, so to speak, in dollar terms, which, by the way, they haven't, what you can buy with those dollars is immeasurably better than it was 40 years ago.
And much cheaper in bulk of what you can actually get. I mean, even a landline phone in the 70s would cost you more than a cheap cell phone today.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can give a phone to the whole family now. They've got a plan for it and everything. You couldn't do that in the 1970s. I mean, not without spending a lot more money.
You could, but there was a single phone line that came into your house and went to a single rotary telephone that cost you, $100 a month, and you could use it in one place at one point, and you couldn't have and second lines were expensive, all kinds of crazy stuff. Like this is just. I mean, this is divorced from reality. Like, this is just not
It is.
true.
It's a massive difference. You and I were both born in the 80s, and we're young by the standards of, a lot of other people who were like, look at all the stuff you could get in the 80s compared to the 70s and 60s. But, like, the explosion of the way that things are created in modern entrepreneurship, it's just incredible being someone from the 80s and having seen all that happen. I mean, when I was a kid, we would go camping, and the coolest little gadget that we had was this like 8-inch black and white box of a TV with an antenna on it that could get black and white channels in the middle of the woods. Of course, we had 3 channels back then. Yet that is actually because everyone makes the joke about how you could only have so many channels at this point, but we actually were alive at that point. We're old enough now to where we can be one of the people that was like, yeah, you remember when you could only get 3 channels?
Do you remember the VHF and the UHF knobs on the television?
Yeah. Actually, even in the 90s, like, we did not really. In our family, basically my parents gave me their old black and white TV while we were growing up. And so for years, even when color TVs were a thing and everyone had one, me and my brother were still playing like the Sega Genesis on an old black and white TV that my parents had given me because, well, for one thing, we loved that TV. And for another, why buy a new TV when you got one that works? It was like a special thing to hook.
Well, because TVs were incredibly expensive back then as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, a TV back then that was, 26 inches could be $800. It was a special thing to buy a TV back then.
Yeah, and it's like, remember when HD TVs were expensive?
Yes. I remember when the TV I own cost me $179, and it was this is actually the first big TV I ever bought that was an HD TV. I still have, and it's still a great TV. I bought it for $179, and it had been so long since I bought a TV before I got it. When I went in, I was expecting to spend about $600.
Yeah.
So it was like, wow, prices really dropped. I mean, like, I have in my apartment, 3 TVs now, and that would have been unthinkable when I was a kid that I would ever even own 3 TVs. And in my family, we had a TV for the kids and a TV for my parents had the living room TV.
Yeah.
And that you felt wealthy back then just having the ability to watch TV when your parents were watching TV. Now it's just taken for granted. It's like I know people that they're like, oh, I don't have that much money, but then you see how they live, and it's like, oh, you've got 4 TVs with video game systems hooked up. It's a good life right now. The only difficult thing is keeping government out of it as much as possible.
Pretty much.
So where did we leave off?
Third worst level of socioeconomic mobility in the developed world before the Great Recession. Wait, what?
Are they counting people that are fleeing countries at the peril of their lives? Because
I don't need. There's no citation here. Do you? I mean, like the socioeconomic mobility in the U.S. is extremely high, right? Like 20% of the people that are in the bottom quintile will end up in the top quintile in the next 10 years or something like that. Like the number is ridiculous.
Yeah, the number of wealthy people that are produced in America is actually, when I first heard it, it was staggering. It was like, wow, I could get there, and I shouldn't. When you actually see the numbers, you're like, it might not be that hard to get there when you think about it. And it's really not if it's something that you really set your mind to. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I'm a bit lazy about things, but I could probably in 10 years be at a comfortable living level to where I wouldn't even be worrying about retirement if I just stopped living the lifestyle I'm living now. It would be a piece of cake. And I don't make that much money. I mean, I think the bigger problem is that it's just become unreliable for people to try and save money to retire, and that's the biggest fear that everyone has is what are you going to do to make sure that your money is worth something when you retire? That's another episode. Let's keep getting through this. We can get into inflation and the Federal Reserve at another point. Did I lose you again?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. All right, so
Let's see. The erosion of the earning and bargaining power of workers in the United States.
not true.
Again, this is just not true. When she says the erosion of bargaining power, she means the decrease of union membership, which does not necessarily correlate to a decrease in bargaining power, because because there's been no legislative moves that have made unions less useful, except for a few states have made it so that you don't have to join the union in order to get a job in a certain industry, which is, I think, reasonable.
I'm going to guess that Ocasio-Cortez is not in a union.
I mean, well, no, she is. She's in the federal something or other union, probably,
wait,
right?
They have a union
Oh yeah,
for Congress people?
probably. I don't know, maybe, or maybe. What is Congress aside from a ridiculous union?
Yeah, good point. But, coming from someone who actually is in a union and is working in an industrialized sector of the economy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and say that every single person that I work with, everything that they're doing, myself included, we are all outrageously overpaid. Like seriously outrageously for the work we do. I mean, I would just say overpaid if I was doing the job that I had previously had, working at a printing press. I would say I was slightly overpaid for what I do. Slightly. It actually took way more skill to do what I did at that job than what I'm doing now. And when I say way more, it's like I couldn't exaggerate it enough. I had to run a production collator, and that was one of the easier technical jobs at the place. My current job, I take a rivet gun and put some rivets in a thing for 10 hours a day. The amount of skill it requires is next to nothing, and it's actually really boring, and I would have actually liked to work my previous job at the same wage, but they offered me a lot more money just because it's a union job and it's a payment that's protected, and it's like, well, I guess I'll take it then, whatever.
Yeah.
And yes, they are... for what I'm doing, I have never worked a job as easy as what I'm doing before for anything more than $8 an hour, and I'm making well over twice that much. So, take that for what you will. I know a lot of people think that everyone should get a living wage, but my job isn't worth $8 an hour.
I think it's important to note that if people voluntarily leave unions, that doesn't mean that their bargaining power has decreased. It means that the unions are ineffective at providing them with bargaining power.
Yeah, there's that too. Because I mean, I've been in 3 different unions, and every single one of them, when you actually talk to people, it's like the people that are actually union, like they're part of the union and they do a lot of the campaigning for the union, which is just such a weird, disgusting thing to think about. They love the union, but then you actually talk to the people that work there, and they're like, yeah, they couldn't do this for me, they couldn't do that for me, and every time there's a problem, they kind of shy away from you, they don't tell you the truth at meetings. Our particular union was kind of funny. I won't say what we are, but they got into a lot of trouble for, apparently a lot of the union people had taken these credit cards from the company that were supposed to be used to fund these union things, and some of them had gone as far as buying new cars for themselves. Several people went to jail over it. It was ridiculous, and there were a lot of people that never got punished for it, and a lot of people, when they talk about it, they bring that up and they talk about these people, and they hate them. They're like, they were spending money that was supposed to be helping our union, and they used it all for themselves and their little parties and things. So these are not necessarily completely moral beings that you're putting in charge of things.
Yeah.
All right, so
Part D, inadequate resources for public sector workers to confront the challenges of climate change at local, state, and federal levels. So, I imagine like Ocasio-Cortez standing with her hand out, saying "stop" to climate change.
Yeah, this doesn't actually say what the problem is.
This is just a meaningless sentence. Like, when you say inadequate resources to confront the challenges, do you mean, like, they don't have magic pixie dust? Or do you mean they don't have the power to shut down all of industry in the United States? Like, which is it?
It's got to be one of those things, because I can't really figure out what else. I mean, okay, so let's just look at...
And then I love the fact that there's local, state, and federal levels that don't have adequate resources, because this is just a giant federal power grab. So what does she care about local and state levels?
It's really funny, because who has the most resources in the country? That would be the combined the combined levels of government, i.e. federal, state, and local. They control the majority of resources. You can pretend that big corporations control them, but at any time the government can say, no, you know what, you can't build a building here, you can't use this particular kind of wood, you can't we can't let you have to shut your store down because you don't have the right kitchen sink installed. They have a lot of control over a lot of things, and some of it is very arbitrary, so you can't even count on what you can do and what you can't do. And not only that, but she's talking about them having inadequate resources. Isn't lots of money being spent on lawyers and people sitting around running back and forth, putting together this bill that's about climate change? Like how much did it actually cost if you were to add up all of the people that had to sit down and discuss this bill and put it together, and how many lawyers did they have to call to put the various drafts together and check the language and all these other things? I'm willing to bet that it was a significant chunk of taxpayer change. And and then just add to the fact that it's an abomination. But what can you do?
Well, I mean, like this actual. The best part is that this Green New Deal thing, because it's not going to actually be implemented, is actually just a complete waste. Like all they're doing is basically spitting into the wind and hoping for the best.
Yeah, so it would be nice if they used those resources for something beneficial. If the number of things that the government is doing that one could legitimately say is beneficial at this point just dwindles every year.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, so we have the greatest income inequality since the 1920s, with the top 1% earners accruing 91% of gains in the first few years of economic recovery after the Great Recession.
So hold on. I'm just gonna. What was done right immediately after the Great Recession that caused this?
Well, I mean, there was this giant bailout and these TARP programs.
No, hold on. A bailout by whom?
Do you want the honest answer or the answer that people would want to hear?
Did the government bail out things?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
All right, so the top 1% earners, blah, blah, blah. Okay, B, the largest racial wealth divide amounting to a difference of 20 times more wealth between the average white family and the average black family. C, a gender earnings gap that results in women earning approximately 80% as much as men at the median. All right.
So first off, she doesn't even know what median means. She means mean. Second off,
well, she didn't write this either, so that makes it even funnier. They probably called a professional in for that.
It's just dumb because those are average numbers, not median numbers. Because median numbers are going to be different from average numbers, and plus the gender earnings gap has been debunked 100 times already. It's this is the kind of thing that happens when you take a multivariate problem and jam it into one variable. And it's just bad analysis. It's stupid analysis of a problem. And if this is indicative of the quality of the rest of this thing, I think we don't have much to look forward to.
I wish I could say I wish I could say I'd already read ahead so that I could drop another you're gonna love this, get a nice chuckle out of you. But I think we're gonna have to pass on that one because I don't know what's coming up.
And then the racial wealth divide. I don't think that's actually like what are they counting? Like 20 times more wealth between the average white family and the average black family? So like the average black family has what? Like what is the net worth of the average black family? Like 10,000. Let's say it's something ridiculously low, right? Let's say it's $10,000. that would mean that the average white family is worth $200,000. I don't believe those numbers.
That's not correct. That's not the average median. The average median income would have to reflect that for that to be true, and it does not.
Well, I'm just saying that, like,
I mean, there are a lot of people
that make.
There are a lot of people that make $200,000 a year. I mean, there could be.
No, but that's not average.
No, it's not. But I mean, there could be some truth to. There's definitely.
No. But they're saying wealth, not income, right? So like.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so like they're basically saying that like no black family owns a house.
Yeah. Wow.
Like this is bizarre. This is just.
Yeah, because the number of people...
Like, this either needs a citation or something, because I'm not going to believe it just based on the word of a government lackey.
Yeah, and then going back to A, where it says the top 1% of earners accruing 91% of gain... there was no reason that...
No, the government bailout. The government bailout was basically the government taking money from poor people and giving it to rich people.
Yeah, no, that's what it was.
That's
not what I'm
I mean,
saying,
right now, the Federal Reserve is paying banks billions of dollars a year because to basically keep their excess reserves from circulating, to keep inflation from running rampant. Like that's this is a big deal, right? The Federal Reserve basically made a policy that if banks have extra reserves at the Federal Reserve, then they're going to pay interest on the extra reserves. That wasn't done before the Great Recession.
Yeah,
and so it was basically a way for them to keep a lot of excess monetary stimulus from affecting the economy significantly. Basically, telling the banks, "Oh yeah, you can just put it here, and we'll just pay you free money."
Yeah, and if they're proposing,
like that's not how banking works in a free market system, right? Like. You don't just put money in and you get more money back for free without doing any work. What is actually happening in banking is that the money that you hand in is being kept away from you. It's being held onto and then being invested, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that these banks can just basically leave money at the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve will print them new money is different from banking, even from fractional reserve banking, which isn't necessarily what I'm talking about. Like there are certificates of deposit where you hand the bank $10,000 and in 6 months you get back $10,000 and $10,050 or something. Like those are all legitimate banking things, because during that 6 months the bank took the money that you gave them from the CD and they gave it to someone to start a business.
Yes, and it's the interest of doing business with a bank. That's one of the problems that exists.
I mean, interest doesn't just appear; it has to be produced. Like if you literally put $10,000 into your mattress, you don't actually earn anything on that. And the reason for that is because that money is not being used to actually take base goods and turn them into consumable goods and then sell them at a profit. Like that's what makes interest work, is that people are producing more than they're consuming.
Yeah, and the same policies that are causing, that have made it so that you can't get a good interest rate from a bank. You can't give the bank money and expect to accrue interest on it and actually make anything. Not without having insane amounts of money to hand over to a bank. And even then, it's usually not worth it because it doesn't track to inflation.
Right.
But the same policies that have caused it so that people can't save money to earn interest are the ones that have also caused the Federal Reserve to basically hand free money to wealthy banks.
Yeah.
It's and if Ocasio-Cortez is proposing stopping that, I'm all ears on that, but it doesn't look like that's what they're saying here.
No, she has nothing to say about that.
Yeah, she won't have anything to say about that.
I mean, if she's going to, think about it this way: if she's going to collapse the aviation industry, she's going to have to bail those people out.
Yeah. Well, in her case though, she's actually a socialist, so her goal is the destruction of capitalism. So eventually the banks would bite it in the end if she had her say anyway. I mean,
Well, there are still banks in the Soviet Union. They're just not. You just can't access them as a regular person.
yeah.
She's going to create. I mean, the end result of anything like this is going to be the creation of a two-tier society. A real two-tiered society where the average person can't get anything except the government crumbs, and the government people all live in abject luxury.
Yes, exactly. And that is the kind of person that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. When you boil it down, she's no different than Bernie Sanders. That at the very least, I would say that maybe Bernie Sanders believes in the socialist idea a little more than she does, but he still has 4 houses. I mean, the guy does not live.
3,
he doesn't live the lifestyle that he says everyone else should live, and that kind of makes.
He got kicked out of a commune for not wanting to work.
I didn't know that.
I mean, he just wanted to talk about communism, and people were like, no, in order to make the commune work, we all have to work. And he's like, millionaires and billionaires, and they're like, get out.
That's hilarious. Because, and that's the thing, people like to get down on libertarians, but a lot of them put their money where their mouth is. They're like, you know what? We don't care if you want to live in a commune. We're not against people who want.
Well, that's the advantage of the libertarian, path. Is that, you know what? If you and some people want to get together and form a commune and own everything in common, and from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs, go ahead. You are totally free to do that in a free society. But it doesn't work the other way around, right? If you were in Soviet Russia, you can't be like, hey, let's go be anarcho-capitalists over here in this tiny corner of the Ukraine, right? You just get killed.
Yeah,
they just shoot you in the back of the head.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's a much more peaceful way of looking at the world. The sad fact is that a lot of the ideologies that they have are twisted when people talk about them in the media to make them look. I think a lot of people's images of what a libertarian is a Republican MAGA hat wearing redneck that loves Donald Trump but also smokes weed.
Something like that.
And it's couldn't be further from the truth, especially since the libertarians are much more anti-war than the Republicans could ever hope to be at this point. I mean, the Republicans are gung-ho about. It's the John McCain thing, like show me a war that he wouldn't support.
Show me a person overseas he didn't want to shoot in the back of the head.
Exactly. And whereas libertarians are like, we don't need to be over there for any of that. What are we doing? Let's not kill people. Let's not
kill these people.
Let us produce things and sell them to people, things that people might want.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's not jump off into ideology here. Let's keep going through here. We still got a good amount to go through, and we should probably pick it up.
Whereas climate change, pollution, and environmental destruction have exacerbated systemic racial, regional, social, environment. Wow, this is just a laundry list. First off, she says systemic. So, I would like to know what racial injustices are currently systemic. You mean affirmative action?
That might be what she's talking about, maybe, but I doubt it.
She must be talking about systemic regional injustices, housing and urban development, or Bureau of Land Management. Which of those is the systemic regional injustice that we're talking about, or systemic social injustices? Systemic social injustices. You mean you mean bank bailouts, right? Or systemic environmental injustices.
Ooh, a fun one.
What you mean
you mean climate change proposals and the EPA?
You mean the EPA permitting certain companies to dump certain amounts of waste in certain things, or the EPA causing spills itself? Or what systemic economic injustices are we talking about here? Are we talking about progressive taxation? Or proposed wealth taxes, or these are all when I see these words, I either know that she's talking nonsense or that she is just divorced from reality again.
Well,
But disproportionately affecting indigenous communities. The
Native Americans. What does she mean by indigenous?
yeah, like
some of them are doing quite well. They have casinos.
Well, it's not just that, but like most of these. I mean, most of the federal government stuff specifically excludes the Native American communities because of the wow, I said plantation. That's crazy. I mean reservation system.
Is there a difference? I mean, really,
it's not that much of a difference.
So, but wait, no, that's
communities of color. Wow, communities of color. That's.
No.
It's like segregation?
Hang on. I figured it out. When she said indigenous communities, what she was talking about was the people that are indigenous to the city of New York, and how they have a right to live in the city of New York, and that she has to provide adequate housing. Remember, we did a whole video on that.
Oh, yeah. And then we've got migrant communities. Migrant communities? Does she mean, like, not citizens?
I'm not sure, because I don't remember. Are there any nomads left in America?
Oh, deindustrialized communities, like New York.
No, I got it. No, migrant communities. She's talking about people who have mobile homes.
Oh, mobile home people.
Yeah, that's probably what that is.
Depopulated rural communities. If it's depopulated, is it still a community?
No, it's not. It's
the poor, just in general, the poor.
Which may have
low-income workers.
Other categories.
Low-income workers who are also who are not the poor. We got women.
Wait a minute. She follows up
women in general. Women in it's like that thing that Hillary Clinton said was like, women are the victims of war. They lose their brothers, they lose their sons, and they lose their fathers. It's like let's see. We've got the elderly. You mean the people that aren't going to be here to see the 2 degrees Celsius? The unhoused, the homeless people.
Rudy, we're not going to be here to see the 2 degrees Celsius.
No, that's also true. The unhoused. And she doesn't mean homeless people. She means like people that have apartments.
Yeah.
Because it's a right to own a house.
It's not an investment. Apartment. I don't want to live somewhere where I have to mow a lawn.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. You also have a homeowners association that you need to comply with, and property taxes to worry about, and other things. People with disabilities, like I mean, is being intellectually and economically vapid in a disability? In which case, is Ocasio-Cortez in there? And the youth.
Let me just say she is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the youth have a lot of time to improve their situation. What does she mean by the youth? What is she saying about the youth?
She's basically saying everyone. This is so ridiculous. She's basically taking.
No. Let me sum all of these up.
What she's saying that these things disproportionately affect a significant majority of the population.
Hang on.
Right? Because women is already half the people. Then we've got all of the elderly. We've got all of the youthful. We've got all of the poor. All of the migrants, all of the people of color, all of the indigenous people. The only people that are not disproportionately affected by climate change are middle-aged white men who aren't unemployed.
No.
And also are making decent money.
It's funnier than that, because I think we weren't paying attention to the wording. She says climate change, pollution, and environmental destruction have exacerbated these things, but then like exacerbated is the ending word that leads into the list. So if you read it for each one, you get things like climate change, pollution, and environmental destruction have exacerbated youth.
No. They've exacerbated injustices by disproportionately affecting youth. Which is
how?
Yeah,
but anyway,
this is the thing, right? Like giant meteor hits the United States, women and children hardest hit, right? No, all of the people who were with the meteor were pretty badly hit.
and furthermore, let me just take this list and say that
Yeah.
they've exacerbated. That's what it sounds. This is her mental masturbation.
This is an exercise in exacerbation.
Yeah. So it's exacerbated systemic racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic justices by disproportionately injustices by disproportionately affecting marginal voters.
Blah blah blah. Yeah, marginalized people.
There you go. No, marginal voters. It's important.
Marginal
that we say
voters.
marginal
Yeah,
voters.
there you go.
That's what
Voters,
this is really
yeah.
all about. So,
well, it's not. She's a representative, not a senator. She only has to deal with the people in her tiny district, tiny gerrymandered district, tiny gerrymandered district in New York City.
Very tiny gerrymandered district
in New York City. The only people that need to vote for her are them. Unless in like 7 years she decides to run for president. God forbid.
No, if she runs for president, I'm running for president.
You can run for president. You just won't be able to win the Republican primary, and so you won't be on the ballot. She could get on the ballot.
I could probably. Part of me wants to run as a Democrat, actually.
Well, you can't. The Democrat has a stranglehold on who can run as a Democrat.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And so in general, in the local party, no, this is actually a thing.
No, I know. That's
why
how they cornered Bernie Sanders on that one.
Well, no, it's not just Bernie Sanders. Other people have run into this too, where in order to run as a Republican, you basically just need to go to the. How can I put this? I read there was an author that I read a while back, and he said that he was running as a Republican because it was impossible for him to run as a Democrat without being part of the old boy network that the Democrats.
Yeah, no, they have a different rule system about how you can
exactly.
get nominated. But it's not a matter of running to oppose her. It's just like, if this idiot's going to run, I'm going to run and make it the most ridiculous election of all time. Like, I would have no illusions that I could win because I would be honest with people, and people hate honesty, and an honest person is never going to be president. That's how it is.
It's part of the prerequisites for the job.
Yeah.
Not honest. There you go.
But I mean, like, I could run this election if I want to. I'm old enough, and there's part of me. We talked about this. We talked about how you and I should run just to point it out for the rodeo that it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't need to run to do that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Anyway, let's keep going. Whereas climate change constitutes a direct threat to the national security of the United States by impacting the economic, environmental, and social stability of countries and communities around the world.
So wait, if it's around the world that it's affecting,
No. She says direct threat and then talks about other countries having problems. That is an indirect threat. First off. And then she says, by acting as a threat multiplier,
which doesn't mean anything.
Which doesn't mean anything.
That whole statement is just like, I don't know. Let's say X4 for everything.
Yeah. Extra point bonus.
Yeah.
What is this, Tony Hawk? Jesus.
Whereas the federal government-led mobilizations during World War II and the New Deal created the greatest middle class that the United States have ever seen. If you say so.
I hate to say this, but
they stagnated the middle class for almost a decade.
They stagnated everybody for a decade, and then they rationed everything for 4 years, and then when that ended, they actually shut down the stuff that they had taken control over, and then things expanded. Like this is just history revision. This is just revisionist history. Many members of frontline and vulnerable communities were excluded from many of the economic and societal benefits of these mobilizations. The military was integrated then, so what are you complaining about?
Not enough cheese factories?
Yeah, government cheese factories.
Exactly. I thought I was going to have to finish that joke myself. Very, very well done.
It's what I do. Whereas the House of Representatives recognized that a new national, social, industrial, and economic mobilization on a scale not seen since World War II and the New Deal is a historic opportunity
or destruction.
Wow. to create millions of good high-wage jobs in the United States. That's false. To they could be high wage. It's just they aren't going to be productive.
Which means that they won't ultimately benefit the economy in any way.
She's actually thinking that this is going to make us prosperous. Like, this is just insane.
Did that happen during...
This is mental illness. No, this is crazy. Like this is batshit fucking insane. Like, I'm going to make it so you can't truck vegetables across the country. That'll make us more prosperous. Like, this is backwards in the worst possible way.
No. Let's
also,
be fair.
Also,
to
counteract systemic injustices.
Vegetables across the country. You just have to stop to recharge your truck every 45 minutes.
A rickshaw is not a truck.
Well, there's that too. Actually, now that you mention it, it takes a lot of CO2 energy to create the electricity that you charge your vehicles with. So, yeah, we can't use electric vehicles either.
Well, I mean, not unless they're powered by wind, which is dependent on natural gas turbines, or solar, which is dependent on the strip mining of large quantities of rare earth metals.
Can you hang on.
Producing them through an industrial process into.
Can you strip mine with electric vehicles?
I'm sure that.
Just imagine the battery array you would need for that.
So this is funny. This is funny because like this is the same thing that happened when Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. He's like, yeah, capitalism produced a lot of capital, and we're going to need to use that capital to make our communist utopia. And then it's like, but what happens when we run out of capital? That'll never happen. What? Huh? So we've gotten through the declarative part of this, and we're already at an hour and a half. So I think we should probably call it for now, and maybe do the rest some other time.
Oh yeah, we can do that. I was kind of hoping to do the whole thing in one go, but I did not realize just how bad it was going to get. Like how much of this just needed more fleshing out.
Yeah, this is really bad, and it's gonna.
It's just really important. Like, people need to realize why these things are bad ideas, so that when they hear them in the future, they can finally, people can just be like, "That's dumb, and it won't work, and it will kill. It will literally kill."
I mean, like, let's look at this last number two. This is number one, to create millions of good high wage jobs in the United States. Look, this is divorced from reality in the sense that a wage is. I mean, I've said this before on one of our videos,
a recent
right?
one.
A wage is not some magical thing where it's like, oh yeah, you just get paid $15 an hour for this. The reason you get paid $15 an hour is because the stuff you produce is worth at least $15 an hour. Otherwise, it's unsustainable.
Yeah, I think you actually said that in one of the last Ocasio-Cortez ones we did.
I probably did, but it's like, it's important to note that during the early stages of the New Deal, they actually had people like moving rocks from one side of a building to another side and back again, and they paid them to do that. And that's a job, but it doesn't produce anything. And that person, if they were doing something productive, even if they got paid like less because it was not a government like provided free job, the economy in general would be better off, and so would they in the long run, because they're actually producing something as opposed to merely consuming.
Yes, and not only that, but it's important to note that you do a lot of bad things by doing that, because another important function of money is to signal to people what should and should not be done. And when you pay people a high wage to do something that is ultimately unproductive, such as moving rocks from one place to another without any purpose or any reason other than to pay people, you have sent a signal to the economy at large that there is profit to be made by sending money that way. There's ways you can reap benefits from people moving rocks. Like people don't necessarily get to see, when they see where money is being spent, what it's being spent on. They just know that the money was spent. And so it becomes an opportunity field for many people to try to get money from it. And when you have tons of people that could be doing something productive running off and making money just moving rocks, then you have wasted not only the resource, but the ability of the money that was spent to signal information about what could be being done elsewhere in the economy. So people that are running businesses are seeing that, oh, there's not money being spent here or here or here. And there's just this money being wasted over here, but they don't get to see that because it's just, there's no production coming out of it. They don't get to see the result of anything. So they don't know that there could be opportunities in this area of the economy, or there aren't opportunities in this area, because the influx of cash is not positive or negative for certain things. It's being wasted elsewhere. And that's a huge problem. That's why the New Deal was a failure, in fact. But anyway.
Well, there were a lot of reasons why the New Deal was a failure.
Money being misused and resources being mismanaged is one of the biggest ones, though. Let's finish up 2 and 3 here, and then we can pick up with the rest at a later date. So, number 2, to provide unprecedented levels of prosperity and economic security for all people of the United States. That's basically a repeat of number 1, which is an empty promise.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is...
We are at unprecedented levels of prosperity. We are the richest people in the world.
But it's not. It's. What am I trying to say here? This stems from an insane perception of what government is and can do. Like, the notion here is that government can basically wave a magic wand and say, "Be thou prosperous," and everyone will be prosperous, when the exact opposite of that is true, right? Like it makes no sense to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop using gasoline, oil, natural gas, nuclear power, coal power, and all of that. We're going to brown out half the country. But it's all right, because we're gonna build a bunch of wind turbines that actually require natural gas turbines to effectively provide power. Okay, so it's all right. The factories will just have to turn on and off with the wind. That'll be fine. And then we'll do solar. But in order to do solar, we have to do mining, which is extremely energy intensive. So we kind of just have to use what we have now. I mean, she's just like imagining that like solar panels can be whisked into existence by fiat, when it's the magical thinking of someone who's never seen anything other than a fiat money system.
Yeah, and not only that, but like, what do you think the spike of energy required across a load to start something up, like a factory, is? Like you can't just shut these things on and off.
You have to now. I mean, they have to be powered by something with without any backup power capabilities, because all the backup power capabilities are carbon positive.
Yeah, so good luck building those wind turbines. Just saying.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to use... I mean, this is what Marx said, right? We'll have to use the capital that already exists to make our utopia. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. Please stop.
So it's just like you will end up, simply because
you just consume the capital and you end up in a third world country.
Yeah, simply
like Soviet
because
Russia.
The hammers haven't rusted or had broken handles yet. You might have enough hammers and nails to go around for people to build tiny...
No. You maybe have hammers, but like the Soviet Union had a serious problem producing nails.
Well, no, I'm talking about the windmills. I'm like, you might be able to crank out a few wooden windmills after you run out of the resources to make the ones that...
No, you can't. Wood is carbon positive.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, shoot.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Man, there's a lot of things you can't do with the Green New Deal. Like, I don't know, survive.
But this is the problem, right? Like this is what happens when you have experts on two sides of the same coin and both of them given authoritarian power, right? This is what I talked about in I think it was the Venus Project thing, where it's like you just have a million tiny Eichmanns shooting each other.
Yeah. And the question ultimately boils down to this. It's like, do you want the Green New Deal or do you want toilet paper? It should be a simple choice. And I know that people require more explanation as to why it should come down to that choice. And we're trying to provide that. But there's just too many people that are just too quick to say, yay, socialism. Or, I mean, I don't expect people to just... There are also people that, without knowing what they're talking about, are quick to jump up and say, yay, capitalism. And a lot of times, especially, in the libertarian circle...
Or even people who hate things that aren't capitalism and call them capitalism.
Oh, well, that's the worst, but... And there's not much you can do about that other than continue to try to educate people on it. But I encourage anyone, even if they are a capitalist, to at least examine the ideas behind it a little. Get familiar with the ideas of socialism and capitalism, and don't just look at something and say, because I hate that, I don't need to know anything about it. It's a lot easier to understand where the problems are in government policy if you know about things like socialism and capitalism and what the differences are and what historically has happened when each has been implemented. If you've got a false idea of what capitalism is, then you're very quick to say, oh, well, capitalism has been a failure here, here, and here. So clearly we need socialism, and that's a very vague way to spend your. That's a very fog-headed way to live.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, nobody wants to make decisions on bad information, and if your whole philosophy is anti-capitalism, but you don't know anything about it, do you really know what you even stand for?
Right.
I've always been amazed that there are people out there that don't mind that they don't even know what they stand for, and like there are people you tell them you literally stand for the death of millions of people, and they don't believe you.
Right.
It's like, no, Mao killed millions of people, and you're walking around with a little red book.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's
and those same people will jump down someone else's throat and accuse them of being like Hitler.
Of course.
It's really weird.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, weird is a nice word for what it is. But yeah,
I hate to rub it in these people's faces, but capitalism created the millions and billions of people that socialism was able to come along and murder.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, subsistence farming is not a particularly like you can't support a lot of people like the reason people went to work in the factories in England during the Industrial Revolution was because even as bad as those conditions were, it was better than subsistence farming and barely eking out a living, and it was better than working down in a coal mine and dying at the age of 35 from black lung. I mean, despite how primitive and dangerous and bad the conditions were in those factories, it was still a far sight better than the alternatives. The people in China during the Cultural Revolution were indeed forced to go work in factories or go work in farms or whatever. But that wasn't the case on the onset of the Industrial Revolution. Those people moved because it was the best way for them to maintain their own lives. And that can't be overstated enough.
Yeah, that was specifically people seeking out prosperity.
Yeah.
In China, you had a lovely government that was more than happy to put guns to people's heads and say, go work in a factory, because they wanted to reap some of the benefits of the wealth of the Western world.
Exactly. They
could have just as easily have let entrepreneurship flourish in their country. They chose guns, and there's still a lot of problems in China because of that, especially given that they decided to match our central banking schemes.
Yeah.
But we can talk about the impending doom that will beset China.
That's what the next part is going to be about, the impending doom that the Green New Deal, or as Dave Smith calls it, the Green Leap Forward, is going to produce in the next few pages of this document. So, I'd say come back next time, and we will cover the actual policy prescriptions that are made and how ridiculous they actually are.